I hope we make this panel as interesting as what we just experienced. It'll probably be calmer. Look, as Dana just reminded us, 13 years ago, the Arab Peace Initiative was brought forth. And there was an excuse at that time for Israel to not respond. It was the middle of a very terrible intifada. It happened to come actually at what turned out to be the worst month of the intifada, right before the bombing at the Park Hotel in Netanya. And it was simply not the right time. The time had not been thought through by, at that time, Crown Prince Abdullah. But the Arab Peace Initiative was renewed in Riyadh in 2007, and it has been renewed since in the Arab world. And today, in 2015, there is still no government of Israel response. There is an Israeli peace initiative, but it's from an NGO. It's a private initiative. So when you hear today about what's fashionable, to hear about, well, the idea of bilateral negotiations is passé, and what we need is a regional solution. There is a regional framework that has been waiting to be worked on, to be thought about, to be negotiated for 13 years. And so, in a sense, the simple task, I think, of us as we see this issue from here, and as you see it from there, is to think how Israel can now respond to an Arab world that is still challenged, is very badly divided, but where we have heard recently a reiteration of the Arab world in support of the Arab Peace Initiative. I'd also remind us that historically this has been an Israeli dream. I take you back to 1991. Yitzhak Rabin, before he became prime minister, gave a major speech which he then repeated in his first meeting in Kennebunkport, Maine with the then president, George H.W. Bush, in which Rabin said, "It is imperative as a national strategic and security requirement of the State of Israel to make peace with the Arab world because the emerging threat to the security of Israel is going to come from Iran." Rabin understood as early as 1991 that the so-called peace process, the continuation of the Arab-Israeli conflict, had become a burden on Israel's ability to deal with its more significant security challenges. Interestingly, part of the backdrop to Crown Prince Abdullah's bringing forth the Arab Peace Initiative in 2002 came from the same strategic perspective. Because the Saudis understood 13 years ago that for them, the emergence of a potentially hegemonically inspired Iran was going to present a major challenge to the kingdom, a challenge which today we see has become a reality, both in the proxy war that's taking place in Syria and in the proxy war that's taking place in Yemen. So we've reached a point where the strategic understanding of the challenge and the strategic imperative of resolving the challenge on the part of Israel and a good part of the Arab world have come together. And yet we still have this gulf that there is no decision on the part of the Israeli government on how to respond to the Arab Peace Initiative. Now, for those of you who are familiar with it, you know that it has elements in it which represent Arab thinking and don't necessarily represent the thinking of this Israeli government or previous Israeli governments. There is no requirement that Israel, quote unquote, accept the Arab Peace Initiative. But 13 years after it was initiated, for Israel not to even think of a nusach, a formula in which it can welcome the initiative, in which it can acknowledge it, in which it can understand that that initiative represents a path forward that would not only allow for peace between Israel and Palestinians, but also open the door to a broader peace between Israel and the region, is really baffling. Now, there are a number of efforts, especially in what are called Track 2 meetings. Those are non-official meetings. that have brought Israelis and Saudis together. We saw an example of it the other day when Dory Gold met with a former Saudi general in Washington. And there are many efforts like that. It takes a decision on the part of the Israeli government. And one can only hope that that becomes one of the pathways that the envoy can pursue as he pursues peace.